All right, coming to you live from KubeCon here in Salt Lake City, and I'm here with Sam Alba of Dagger. Sam, how are you?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, I am glad to give you the opportunity so that I can have the opportunity so we can talk to the folks and explain what you're doing. So you're at Dagger now, but if we go back first, take your origin story. You were at Docker before that, and if we go even before that, what was were you in another company? Were you a student when you started? Just how did you get into the whole game?
Sure, yeah. So happy to tell you the whole story. So I grew up in France and
Absolutely.
I did my studies at a school named Epitech in Paris. And I was
Called what does it stand for? It's a tech school.
it's pretty much like a computer science school. And so in that school, I was there with Solomon Hikes, Andrea Luzzardi as well, and some people who then I worked with as well, Sebastian Pal, who co-founded.
And for those folks who don't know these names, I'm sure a lot of people in tech know Solomon, but just in
That's right.
case,
Yeah, and so Solomon then later co-founded Docker, and we
was
start.
this in France or where did?
So Sebastian and Solomon started a project called dotCloud back then. It was
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, and they actually started in Paris,
Okay.
and it was a container-based platform as a service
Yeah.
that they were working on for some time. And at the time, I was working for some startups in Paris.
Mm.
Then later, I joined Akamai, which is an American company. Uh,
And you know that's a Hawaiian word,
I,
and that means smart. Being from Hawaii, I know these things.
that's right, yeah. And that was actually the last company I worked at before I moved to California.
Mhm.
And the idea was Solomon and Sebastian at some point stopped trying in Paris,
Mm.
and they moved to California. They joined Y Combinator in
Ah.
Mountain View.
Was
Uh,
Sam Altman doing that, or was this before Sam?
I don't. I guess it was pretty much. It was. It was in 2010, so people
Okay.
will figure it out. It was in summer 2010,
Hmm.
and yeah, and basically they started to raise some money, and the project finally had a chance to to exist, right? And so this is when I joined the team. So I joined them with Jerome Petazzoni, that some people know, Eric Bardin,
Hmm.
and so it was basically in the early days, the five of us, Sebastian, um, Solomon, Jerome, Eric, and me, and we were all together in a room in San Francisco in Soma. Um, and we were working on this platform as a service, and we were using containers before Docker.
Interesting. So were they? So I'm thinking the containers before you had BSD jails, you had Solaris zones. Was it something like that, or did you simplify it even before Docker?
So, well, first of all, we didn't have as a constraint to open source the technology because we were we were not trying to do that at the time. We just had a commercial. We were building a commercial product. It was all closed source, and we were using for the containers technology. We were using something called LXC that's coming
Hmm.
from Canonical.
Yep.
So we were basically running on EC2 instances in 2010, and for a few years actually, and we were relying on patching the kernel so we could execute into live containers. And so we built a lot of things to simplify containers back then. Actually, we had, for instance, a format for managing images and layers that Docker can do today that people know about.
Yeah, just a personal aside. We started this laptop. It became a line, the Developer Edition XPS 13 Dell, and the vision at first was to position it as a cloud launcher. And so we're using Lexi to act as a container, and it was just too hard. But there was this company that came along later, which you'll probably talk about, called Docker, and it solved the problem. And it did what we couldn't do and did it very well. So just an interruption back to
Right?
this story.
Yeah, and I'm sure I used what you mentioned back in the days actually. So fast forwarding to a few years, we're working on dotCloud, getting traction, getting more and more customers, supporting them on our PaaS.
So why did you say, okay, this is what the world needs is a PaaS?
In terms of virtualization technologies, it was either physical machines or virtual machines. So it was basically virtualizing the whole system, right, with everything in it. The interesting thing is when dotCloud started, we were a PaaS that was offering something different because uh, we are providing a way for people to have a PaaS that's agnostic to the language and technology you
Mm.
use because everything was containerized. Heroku was providing a runtime on virtual machines that embedded Ruby and Rails and all the dependencies needed. Later on, they introduced containers and they were able to support pretty much any language. But yeah,
So where was Azure launched? Because they were originally focused just on PaaS. Were they around then?
I don't remember like, the exact date, but they were still focused on catching up with EC2 and
Right.
AWS, as a whole. And so the idea is, and Google Cloud was also um, around and all trying to provide the same thing to customers, an API in front of virtual machines. It's only later on that they introduced new things like probably Amazon was the first with Lambda functions, for
Mm.
instance. So like a thinner layer of virtualization, so developers could benefit from infrastructure, hosted infrastructure, without having to re-implement all the tooling themselves to deploy, build. So what happened at some point is, well, we raised the Series A in early 2011, and we
And that
lasted.
was as a PaaS. That was as
That's
.com.
right. Yeah, that's right.
.cloud.
As dotCloud on for releasing and supporting the PaaS, and so with that money, we were careful and we kept iterating on the product, but it was not enough. Like we had a linear growth. We were doing well, but not well enough.
Who would be the customers at that time? Were there big companies, little companies?
We had mostly, I would say, small and medium businesses. A lot of them were coming from Y Combinator. Actually, we had
Ah,
access to the
okay.
the network.
Hmm.
um, and so which is always good, by the way, to bootstrap a product because you can do quick feedback, have a quick feedback loop, and so what happened at some point is, well, we were looking at the trajectory of the company, and we didn't have enough to raise again. We didn't have enough to grow the team. It was like we had
So
everything,
how
but
many
not
people at
enough.
this
We
point?
we were like I would say around 20, 15, 20 people. I would say
Hmm.
around that. And so at the time we started to try new things.
Hmm.
We were looking for something else for the company. Like is that if dotCloud is not enough, what's next? And so we started to try a few things. And one of the project was to re-implement the dotCloud runtime. That's the part that's managing containers in open source. So full
But
re-implementation.
so you had the containers within that, right? That was
That's right.
and it was just sort of a means to an end. The PaaS was the end, and then the containers were sort of the kind of the fancy part of it. Or
No, it was really the
oh
core.
wait, this is still Lexi or no?
Yeah, it was using Alexi. Actually, the early version of Docker was using Alexi as well.
Okay.
So yeah, it was based off Alexi, and the idea was we wanted to open source all of dotCloud. Actually, we thought that there was value in a PaaS, and maybe selling it as a commercial product, where people pay, by hour, by
Mm.
minute they spend
Right.
hosting their application, was probably not the right model. But we believed in the technology,
Hmm.
and so we thought that open sourcing it and let the community do something with it was maybe the right move. And so we started with the container runtime, which was the core part of the platform. And we need to find a name. So we named it Docker. It was for a long time. It was actually part of the dotCloud organization on GitHub. So Docker was on github.com/dotcloud/Docker for
So, and
some
why
time.
Docker? And is it? And then when we get to Dagger,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm thinking that it's D and maybe the same number of letters, or why Docker doesn't seem to be an intuitive
No.
name. Now it's a household name, but why?
Oh, I think it was a code name that one of the engineers found in the team, and I don't think we debated a long time, as you can imagine. Uh,
Just a bunch of engineers at this
yeah,
point.
exactly. And so yeah, but we ended up liking the name enough to rename the company later on, actually. Um, so so yeah, we started to release. We launched initially. The repository was private, and we started to show demo to people, and we were surprised and positively surprised by how it was perceived and how it was received by people every time we were giving a demo.
Hmm.
Clearly there was value, tons of value in having a very small container runtime with a very simple image format, because LXC did not implement any image format. LXC could isolate a process on a Linux system, but didn't have something for managing layers of images that Docker can do today. So we actually we had that on dotCloud, and we re-implemented it in Docker, and that's what we released. Um, all of dotCloud was in Python back in the days, but we thought Python was not a good technology choice for, um, you know, simplifying the deployment for people within containers. For details that I can spare you the details, but the idea is we chose Go as a language. It was really in the early days of Go. I think for some time Docker was the biggest Go project. And
And you
so
were probably pretty small at that point.
yeah, we were still pretty small actually. We were like still 15, 20 people. And so yeah, and we started to see traction. We focused everybody on that project, and we started to do only that. We started to create Docker Hub that people know today, where you can host and search for images. Created a login mechanism, like all of that stuff. The build, obviously, the Docker build, the format of Docker file. Funny story there is we were not planning to keep that format around because it was kind of a very simple format to build container images, and we're thinking, well, we don't have time to do something better right away, so we'll do it later. And this is still a format that people use today.
Yeah, it's one of these things that you say, okay, just for now, we'll just do this, and then that's like I bought a cheap stereo saying I only have this for a couple of years, and then I've had it for 20 years. But that's a different type of story.
That's right. And so yeah, there are a lot of things like that. But initially, we wanted to keep building the whole re-implementing the whole part of all of the components of dotCloud in the open source, like the orchestration layer, the networking layer, everything. So people could could assemble their own full PaaS. But there was so much traction on the Docker engine in the early days, and we were so few people that we actually focused only on the container runtime for a long time.
So did it just slowly it grew and the popularity and the interest grew, or was there sort of somebody at a big company who got really into this and helped push you all? Or is this pretty just grassroots like a lot of open
So,
source?
so I think what worked really with Docker was people saw a, a very drastic simplification in the way you can move your code from development to production, and also everything in between. Test your code. It made everything much simpler. You didn't have to package a virtual machine image anymore, which is a snapshot of a virtual disk pretty much,
Right.
which is basically super heavy. So it's slow to upgrade, slow to build, slow to generate, slow to upload to your servers, slow to move around basically.
Wait,
And and
sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
this is back to those mini OSs like Core OS and Atomic from Red Hat and
okay.
Photon. So with Docker, I'm trying to remember now, it at that time it ran on top of a small OS. In other words, and it goes, you can have it on multiple servers as opposed to, oh gosh, I'm going to get confused with VMs that are on. So
So
yeah.
it didn't really change the way people are consuming Linux operating systems in a sense. So CoreOS and Atomic and Rocket, they actually came later, after Docker was well established. But what it changed really for early adopters of Docker was they already had a way to manage their Linux machines, and the problem was really how to then do the last mile of hosting and publishing, deploying the code
Hmm.
that your developers write internally, and move them to production, and keep this loop going, and having it as fast as possible. It was also back in the days where people were still using sometimes FTP or SSH to upload files directly in place on some of those machines, and so Some other people were doing kind of the state of the art back then was things like Puppet or Chef
Hmm.
that were
Oh, yes.
reconfiguring the whole servers based on and including the code part of this configuration management.
Just another interjection. It's funny because I was in DevOps for a long time, and I remember interviewing Luke Knies, of one of the founders of Puppet, and I was, at that point, DevOps is not about the tools, but it always comes back to the tools. There's this gravity.
Right.
So at that point, DevOps equaled Puppet and Chef. Then after that, DevOps equaled Docker.
Right. Yeah.
So, big, I mean, a big enabler of DevOps, and much bigger of how we write today, and uh, how cloud native helped to bring cloud native up to where it is today. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just crazy to think of what you all did and how it just changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's not often that you spend so many years working on a product, and I'm still using Docker today, at Dagger,
Hmm.
and
I mean, who isn't using Docker these days?
yeah, right, and so that's really unique. We don't often think about that, but yeah, yeah, it doesn't happen often.
You should pat yourself on the back, man.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and it was really like we assembled a great team. So part of what I did when we needed to grow the team was to actually build that team. So I was in the early days writing a lot of code on dotCloud and then Docker, and then spend a lot of time structuring things, hiring people, putting some structure in place, leading the roadmap, doing some project management. So I did a lot of that. Then later on, and to expanding the team even further, I did that for the total of 8 years.
Oh, wow.
So I left in 2018, June 2018, um, and a lot of
So
things.
at that point,
Yeah,
uh, was Ben Golub still the so you had Solomon, who was acting, was
yeah,
the CEO, right, in the beginning,
yeah.
and then you brought in Ben maybe in 2012, 2013,
2013 maybe.
because I remember they came to Dell, which I used to work at, and we met with him, Jerome, and I
Yeah,
forgot the other.
Nick Steinmetz.
Yes, yes. Um, and so he then took it for a while, and then who the who was the next CEO, and were you there for that?
So yeah, I was there for part of the some of those changes. I thought they were going to stop at some point, but I after I left, there was many other changes,
Yes.
unfortunately for the team. But yeah, actually the last one was good.
So I'm assuming you work with Scott. Is it
Yeah,
Johnson?
yeah. So
He did a talk here earlier. They did a startup track on the
you're right.
subconference. So he was talking all about being at Docker, and then eventually becoming CEO, which is today.
That's right. Yeah, Scott was actually the very first product manager at Docker. So it was for some time it was my peer. So I was running the engineering team, he was running product. We're working super well together. I really like Scott, and actually, small parentheses, um, I think he did an amazing job to turn Docker around. Uh,
Yeah, because it was, you guys were hot, and then it just had sort of these lost years
yeah,
where it's sort of different models, and um, yeah, and so it sounds like, of course, now it's going like back up again, as you're saying.
yeah, that's right, and I think he did a great work. But yeah, what happened in between was kind of wild, and so Salman left at the end of 2017. Ben Golub was not CEO anymore, um, and
Who, it was somebody from a big company, big SaaS company.
it was Steve Singh who co-founded Concur.
Okay, yeah.
So not exactly in the same field than Docker, but yeah, we were focused on
But
enterprise
a
sales.
seasoned CEO, and they thought
Yeah,
this, that would be, that's what we need. And I don't know if it
yeah.
was the circumstances, but it, for whatever reason, it didn't. You brought somebody else in after that.
Yeah, so when I left, Steve was still CEO, and then I know he was replaced at some point by someone else, and so I'm not even sure what are the dates and the order. I didn't I Anyway, just it was hard to find the right structure, I think, for during those years. And for me, I thought that, after 8 years, I thought my job was done and I needed to do something else, and Solomon
Were
was
you
like, no, no.
frustrated with the direction? I'm making you. Was that the thing, or was it you just was sort of burnt out?
I was feeling that I was getting burnt out. If I was going to be burnt out if I would stay longer.
Hmm.
I was feeling fine actually. Was I frustrated? Well, I guess you're not the happiest person on earth when you leave a company, right?
Yeah.
So uh, to leave it there, but and also I wanted to do something else. I wanted to define the next chapter. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to join a company or start something else, and I had some very good advice at the time from my coach, Aaron Feinberg, who basically gave me one of the best advice I got in
Was
my
he from
career.
Y Combinator, or how did you?
No, it was working with us, and he's working with other companies too. Um, and I'm still working with him today, actually. And he was coaching some of us at Docker, and he told me honestly, you should make some headspace and stop talking to people, because I thought
Mm.
at the time I was going to get the answer for my next chapter by asking a lot of people. So I was meeting a lot of people. I was, anyway, and he told me you should probably, maybe you talk to enough people and you should do nothing for a while, and you'll see that you'll start getting answers. And it's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I did, and I
Spent time mountain biking?
I did mountain biking. I did some. I worked in my backyard. I spent even for a few weeks. My wife and my two kids were in France while I was alone in California for like a few weeks, and I just to doing nothing. Just I
And they
need
were young kids at that point, I'm
yeah,
guessing. So to be away from them, it's just sort of, I
just
mean, you
nothing.
miss them, I'm sure, but at the same time, it's like, ah,
That's right. Yeah, yeah. They were happy they were on vacation, at their grandparents' place in France, and so yeah, and I was just doing nothing, and to be honest, um, I got bored really quickly, and
I think there's a period though, because I'm now chilling, that in the beginning it's really hard to just do stuff like that. But then you slowly get into it with the idea of wanting to get back. But yeah, I think if you push through that first amount of time, you can stay less bored. But anyway, that's just an aside.
yeah, definitely. And it's also an advice I gave to several people who went through the same situation than me. And then I joined them in the summer. So we were in the summer 2018. I joined the rest of the family a few weeks later in France. Um, Spent some more time doing nothing. And at some point it clicked. I was thinking I need to. Um, what I really want is actually to choose the people I work with,
Hmm.
because I realized that this is really what I suffered the most from in the recent years before leaving Docker, was to not be really in control.
Yeah.
And I was, looking mistakes in front of you, and you can do nothing about that. It's so
Yeah,
frustrating.
because the mistakes scale, but you don't. So
Yeah,
there's you can't you
exactly.
can't squash all the bugs, meaning the problems of the organization as well as software bugs,
That's
etc.
right. Yeah, yeah. And also with Solomon gone, I knew that we were not going to turn anything around. So
Just as an aside, Solomon, you would not know that he was French, right? Because he has a speaks like an American accent with an American accent. And I remember talking to him once, and he says the problem he has is popular culture. So people just think he's American, then they'll talk about things that
that's right.
most everyone would know about the Brady Bunch or whatever it might be, and he'll
Yeah.
so. But anyway,
Yeah, I don't get that stuff. People don't tell me about American stuff that much.
that's your gift and your
That's
yes.
right. Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, going back to, yeah, summer 2018, came back to California with family, and yeah, I was set. I was ready to start something new. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew with who I wanted to build it, whatever that was going to be.
Hmm.
And so I started to I talked to Andrea Luzzardi, and then was talking to Solomon along the way a lot. And at some point we decided to do something together again. We went through YC. Y Combinator.
So how many of you were there besides you and Solomon?
So just the three of us. So yeah, Solomon, Andrea, and me. So it was just the three of us, and we stayed actually the three of us for quite a while because we didn't want to redo the same things that we did at Docker. We wanted to change a lot of things, and starting with the team culture, we thought that a lot of things went wrong at Docker. Uh, before I left, a few years before I left, and a lot of mistakes were made because of the culture, the team culture, and I thought a lot about that. I read books, talked to people, and I realized that um, the culture is very important to define in the early days of the company and to protect, to keep iterating on the culture. It's not something static, and more important, the best way to protect the culture is not to grow too fast.
Scaling is really hard. As I mean, that's what cripples a lot of startups. Is you try to get bigger, and you need to hire people as quick as possible. So
That's right.
maybe they're not the right cultural fit, or they're not then as talented as you need, and then that's a really big deal.
That's right. And also we didn't know what we wanted to build at the time. So what we did is we started a long discovery process that we started at YC. YC is amazing for that. I recommend everyone who can apply to YC. I give this advice to many many friends. But yeah, this discovery process was basically talking to as many people as we could, learn about their problems, learn about what we could do for them.
So
Um,
were these customers, fellow engineers? Was it everything?
Everything, uh, friends, friends of friends. Every time we're meeting someone, we're asking, can you give us 5 names of people we can meet? So we were like, constantly getting more and more
Right.
meetings, and we were taking tons of notes. And we were structuring those meetings in such a way that we were categorizing the problems they were talking about. And at some point, we built we did 4 categories of things. So basically everything that people do on development, on their
Hmm.
own development machines. Then everything that happens to be on building and testing your application. Then everything that happens on the deployment phase, and then everything that happens on running in production.
Oh, interesting.
And we thought that we didn't want to go after the development tools on the machine and the like for instance an
Pushing to.
IDE, an IDE for developers or um, a runtime, because the thing is all cloud providers are fighting to get some pieces for on the runtime, like the hosted managed Kubernetes on AWS or whatever, like every single cloud provider has one nowadays.
So would this be then using mapping to the DevOps pipeline and using that to
So,
divide?
so yeah, basically we started to zoom into those 2 categories in the middle. So build, test, and deploy pretty much.
Hmm.
And so we were orienting, as the time goes on, we were orienting those interviews to those categories and learning about those problems. And what we realized is it's interesting. So every single tech company, so any company that's not necessarily a tech company, any company that produces software has this problem of creating the software that automates the build, test, and deploy of their software.
Hmm.
So you have app developers, and then you have the software that what we call oftentimes the CI/CD or the internal developer platform,
Hmm.
and that piece is every single time reinventing the wheel. Re- to take an analogy, it's like if you take a car factory, for
Hmm.
instance. Um, Imagine that if you visit a factory, everything is well standardized, everything is super well optimized. You have robots.
Hmm.
Each robot has its own, task and role. Um, I think in software today, it's pretty much like a bunch of tools that you have in your garage.
Hmm.
You don't have the tools that are optimized for a specific task. You just take what's available and you try to do something with it that makes sense. Every single software pipeline today look like that. And we thought, geez, this is so weird that you have access as a developer to very powerful tools on your development machines. You have so much powerful tools on the runtime, on cloud providers and so many managed services, cloud services, managed databases, etc. And what you need to do to orchestrate what it takes to take your code from your local machine all the way to production is
Isn't that what Docker did? Isn't that that was the container literally
yeah.
that went along the
So
tracks?
Docker did only. So we thought actually we solved that problem initially because we were surprised in this discovery thing. We were like, well, why you're not doing? Could have Docker files and bunch of Docker builds and realized that it's not enough. Docker is really the starting point. Docker is just managing the container, but what people needed was to manage a graph of dependencies of of ideally containers that instruments the order of different tasks that you need to do. So to give an example, one of the first task you do is you pull the code from your Git repository.
Hmm.
Another task is you will run your test or your linter. You will run your build. You will run a bunch of integration tests after you've done your build. And so you end up with a lot of different tasks. And so being able to manage one single container is good, but it's not enough. And so what at some point it clicked, in that discovery process, we were hearing the same thing over and over again.
Sorry, one more interjection.
Yeah.
So you did Docker Swarm, and there's Kubernetes.
Yep.
So how that was into what extent did that have something to do with this, or is that sort of orthogonal to
Not
what you were doing?
not really, because Docker Swarm was really an orchestrator, and Kubernetes as well is an orchestrator for. And sorry to talk about Swarm in the past. I know some people still use it, but it's an orchestrator for running containers. So once you deploy your application to production, not to orchestrate the supply chain, the
Okay.
process of shipping and deploying and building this application. And so what really people need is a DAG. So a DAG is an acronym for
Oh,
directed.
now I'm seeing where the name's coming from.
Exactly. So it's the acronym for directed acyclic graph. So basically, what it says, it's a graph with a direction. So the idea is you don't want to do the same task once and end up with a loop. So you have an algorithm that's called a DAG that to manage that. You have many applications for DAGs today
And
in
I'm guessing that's open source.
yes, and so we introduced Dagger. Dagger is a tool to create DAGs,
And
and
while we were talking, I did the math. 6 letters in Docker and Dagger, they both end in ER.
that was not on purpose. We we talked about that in the early days when we picked the name, and we asked people about that. Also, some people were saying, "Oh, it kind of looked like the same," or some people said, "Not at all." So I don't know. We picked the name. We thought it's a cool name, and
Mhm.
what we define it today as a pipeline engine for your CI/CD that runs everywhere.
Or it's as your leader, as we talked about yesterday, in the uh, PAC market, right? The pipeline is code.
Yeah.
I made that up, so you owe me money for that, but we'll settle it afterwards.
That's right. Those pipelines today, oftentimes, so it starts with your CI basically. So every single company has a CI system, continuous integration. Things like Jenkins, GitHub Actions, Circle CI, etc. And those CI today give you a way to to define this pipeline, oftentimes in YAML. And those YAML pipeline calls to other scripts and pieces of code that your team is building. The problem is this CI is running in a centralized place. It's super hard to maintain. If you ask anyone around KubeCon what CI do you use, they will answer. They will give you an answer because they use a CI system. And if you ask them, are you happy with your CI system? They will say no. And so all of them. And usually the problem is not really on the infrastructure itself. The problem is really how to maintain the code that's running inside the CI. And so,
And was that also something personally you were frustrated with?
um, yeah, I mean, we clearly saw the problem. We had a very large CI at Docker, and the problem is that it starts building a technical debt that you never prioritize to solve because um, it's not your code. It's not the app that you ship to customers and users.
Hmm.
It's the code that ships your code. So that's why it doesn't have the same category as importance. And we thought that Dagger will bring the tools that developer needs to make their CI programmable and agnostic to where they run, which is very important because with Dagger you can write you can implement those pipelines and run them on your local laptop, which you cannot do with you don't run Jenkins or Circle CI locally, for instance, or even GitHub Actions. And so
And once again, that was the a big help to the XPS Developer Edition because you could run it on your laptop and then you could push it to the cloud. It was that idea. In fact, Mark Shuttleworth called it what were they? Mini mini clouds or on your laptop. And as I said, that's what you all did. And it sounds like that's a big advantage of what you're doing now. Is it's not this, well, it ran on my laptop. Why? It's your problem to scale it. It
yeah.
actually works that way.
Yeah, and today when you run everything you run on your CI with pretty much any other CI is hard to run on your local machine anyway, because what the way Dagger solves that is your whole graph of dependency, your whole pipeline is containerized.
Hmm.
So Dagger orchestrates a graph of containers, and so yeah, so we're bringing the programmable CI to developers, so they don't have to deal with YAML, they don't have to deal with a specific format that changes every time you look at the different CI. And more important, that code is reusable.
Hmm.
So Dagger has a way of creating modules that you can reuse. If you ask people also like, do they reuse the code that they write for their CI/CD? Usually they can't actually. It's so
Right.
specific to. So going back to the car factory,
Right.
I'm sure the robots you find in a Tesla factory are pretty much the same in the Ford factory, for instance.
Right.
And so today you can build those robots with Dagger basically, and it doesn't matter if you're shipping different
So you're
cars.
mixing your metaphor here. So Dagger is you're not actually building robots,
No,
but it would be as if
but
you're
it's software robots.
right.
You can really see a supply chain in a factory as the same concepts with the software supply chain.
Hmm.
It's pretty much the same concepts. You need to ship fast. It has to be standardized. It needs to work. Um, if at some point you change your product, so for instance, like to switching back to the car factory again, like
Right.
if I don't know if one day Tesla wants to build a motorcycle, ideally they don't want to rebuild the whole factory.
Right.
So going back to software, if at some point you one day you wake up and you're like, oh, we need to do AI,
Yeah,
you
which is
have
another
time to
thing
run.
you've got to, I'm sure you're doing some kind of AI or at least putting the word in Dagger somewhere, but
So for us, AI is another. It's just yet another software factory, right? And so it just has different constraints. So for instance, if in your AI app you need to train some models or have integration tests that talks to a model, and you need a GPU in your pipeline. When we last year we introduced the support for using GPUs in Dagger, for instance.
do you
Um,
have to make it specific to like NVIDIA's Blackwell or to other, or is it abstraction layer so it's easy to work with whatever GPU?
No, right now I think our implementation only works with NVIDIA, but it's also still experimental because we're still getting feedback from people. But the idea is you don't necessarily need GPU to do AI. Like you can talk to remote APIs, but what I wanted to go with that is it's still an app, right? You still need a software factory whether you do AI or not, and ideally you can make your factory evolve over time. And that's why it's very important to make it programmable and also extendable with modules. So other people don't have to figure out, geez, how I'm gonna change my app to add AI and change the whole way I'm doing, deployment automation, for instance. And so Dagger helps with that because Dagger really provides the primitives that people can build on top.
So would this be, are you in beta? Are you in alpha? Is it launched? Is it, at what point of your
Yeah.
of the product life cycle are you?
So we launched the Dagger engine a bit 2 years ago, I'd say.
Hmm.
So it's stable. We see more and more large organizations using it in production for their internal software development platform. So they basically work on the platform for other developers internally, and so they basically use Dagger to make that more efficient. I won't go too far into the what Dagger can bring, but there is also the speed with the cache optimizations and anyway. But um,
And so the open
and
source community for this,
yeah, yeah, and so we started to build in the early days a community of DevOps, platform engineers, and developers who are looking for different ways and better ways to do software automation. And so they spend time with us on our Discord server, community calls. So we have a lot of activities today at KubeCon at the booth. Actually, we met a lot of them yesterday and in the next few days as well. And and then we also launched a product called Dagger Cloud. So Dagger Cloud
Is
is
it a PaaS?
no, it's just a SaaS, I would say. It's not really a PaaS because it provides visualization of your pipelines.
Mm.
So when you have all of your pipelines implemented in Dagger and running on either your CI or Kubernetes or anything you want to use to automate your pipelines, um, Dagger can send telemetry to Dagger Cloud, and Dagger Cloud shows you traces, what we call Dagger traces. And so a Dagger trace is basically a view of what your pipeline is doing. So you can,
So would that be monitoring and observability that you're doing? And then do you, rather
that's
than
right.
rewriting monitoring and observability yourselves, do you plug in with something like Honeycomb or whatever?
No, so we rely on something called OpenTelemetry that
Hmm.
Honeycomb is using as well, actually.
And that's a Linux Foundation project, isn't it?
I think so. I'm not even sure, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty standard nowadays to implement tracing and use OpenTelemetry, and so Dagger is sending OpenTelemetry, uh, and Dagger Cloud takes those metrics and gives you data like speed, debugging, also showing you logs when it matters more. You know, like imagine you have a pipeline that is running integration tests and building like 50 different microservices in different languages, and you have one that fails,
Hmm.
you know, or even worse, like you have one that fails sometimes, or even worse, you have ones that now is slower to build than others, and slower to build than before. So
And
this is
rather than having to look for the needle in the haystack,
exactly. So Dagger Cloud tells you, look there, and here are the logs. So it's very important. It's a very important piece of the stack. As soon as you automate your whole software factory.
and so just to, you talked about you went to talk to uh, ops people, platform engineers, developers. Who is the main target, or who would be the person who uses this?
I would say so. In large companies, every large companies has a team, sometimes called the build team or the platform team. Um,
Once again, this is the definitions that everybody does
yeah,
differently, and
but they pretty much do the same thing. They work on the software automation for building, testing, and deploying the software internally. It's usually a team that's not too large, depending on the company, and they do things differently. They have different opinions, which was a challenge when in the early days when we designed Dagger, because people use different CI systems, they use different build systems, and we wanted something that works for everybody. And then I really believe we achieved that today, because when I see you know, the the diversity of tools that Dagger users are using today, it's actually yeah, pretty impressive to see how fragmented this space is. But the
mhm.
good thing is Dagger brings all of this together, because a team can write a pipeline that's a perfect way to build and test a Go application and turn that into a module, give that to somebody else, or integration for, I don't know, Argo CD, or an integration for like the best possible whatever canary deployment on Kubernetes. You can turn that into a module, and uh, and other people can reuse it easily.
So what kind of connectors or integrations do you need to work within the pipeline? And what of it is just more general that'll work on any, whether it's Jenkins
Yeah.
or I can't, Bamboo, is that another one?
Yeah.
Uh,
So you technically you well, after you adopt Dagger, I mean you install Dagger, you go through the docs and the quick start and all of that. You don't need particular integration to start with. You can just use the Dagger API and do your thing. But quickly you're thinking about doing more complex things, and you don't want to implement all of those things yourself. And this is when you start looking at something we call the Daggerverse. So we have this website
nice.
daggerverse.dev.
It's like the universe that Canonical has. I don't know if they still have it, but
Oh yeah, Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I haven't thought of that, but yeah. So yeah, you go to daggerverse.dev and you can search for for modules.
Hmm.
Daggerverse.io is also available, I think. And so yeah, you search for modules and you can Dagger install any of those modules. The funny thing is you don't have, because Dagger supports several languages today. We support Go, TypeScript, and Python.
Rust?
Rust, we have an experimental SDK for it, actually contributed by the community. We have one contribution for PHP as well. That's
Perl?
Elixir,
Erlang?
not Perl. We have one for Elixir that's close to Erlang.
Wow. I
Uh,
was just joking, but that's pretty
yeah,
impressive.
yeah, it's and all of that community contributed actually. That's another impressive part. And
Cobol.
no, but the thing is, let's take an example. For instance, you have an Argo CD module that was implemented in Python, for instance.
Hmm.
But I'm not using Python. I'm using Go. I'm writing all of my pipeline in Go. I can do a Dagger install of that Argo CD module, and Dagger will generate the code on my local machine
Hmm.
to use this Argo CD module. And I don't even know that it was implemented in Python, and I don't even care. I don't even have to know. um, all the doc string are ported and everything. So it's very easy to use cross languages, which is another key benefit of larger organizations, because you don't have one single
Right.
language in companies. And so since Dagger runs everything in containers, it's fairly easy to make this agnostic to everybody, so we can have all of those tools being able to interact with each other.
So just to get back to the startup part of this, because I
Yeah,
think a lot of people are interested in that, you went to Y Combinator,
that's right.
and then Erica Brush's company, Redpoint Ventures. Am I getting that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And they were the people who did your Series A, or how did that work?
That's right. Yeah. So Erica, uh, yeah. So Erica is a managing partner at Redpoint.
And she was at COO of GitHub.
That,
Before that, she was at
that's
Bitnami,
right.
which
Yeah.
is where I originally met her,
That's exactly right.
which they sold to VMware.
That's right.
And it's all because of a video I did with her. Um, a long time ago that only got a few views, but one of them was Michael Dell. And so then he pinged me and they set up meetings. And 2 years later, VMware bought them. So I don't know why I didn't get my cut of the deal, but I'll talk to Erica about that later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will let you deal with that. But yeah, Erica, we knew her from Bitnami actually, because they were pretty active in the Docker community. So we had a strong connection with Erica. And then I knew she joined GitHub at some point after the VMware acquisition, and then she joined Redpoint, and that was another reason to reconnect, and we started to talk, and yeah, indeed we raised our Series A with Redpoint, and Erica is now a board member, Dagger, and she's really part of the team. I had some interactions with several different investors in the past at Docker, because we raised some different rounds,
Hmm.
and we started to work with different people, and uh, and I can tell you, Erica is not the typical VC in the sense that she's really part of the team and she really cares.
Hmm.
And that was really a reason, because we didn't need money when we raised that Series A. We were actually not quite ready to do it right away. But one big reason we did it at the time was Erica, because she was really bringing something to the table as a team member, really.
So just like VCs are looking for people, right? That you bet on the person. You
Yeah,
guys were betting on her as well.
exactly. It's very important, actually. Oftentimes you hear startups looking for money, and it's just like, we need money and we want to raise money. But yeah, I mean, it's very important. You don't fire your investors, right?
Right.
And so it's even more important to pick the right ones. And so yeah, I'm glad we did what we did, and we talked with Erica pretty much every week actually. Yeah, and it's going great. And the other people at Redpoint too. Actually, we work with Satish, with Jordan, with many people from the Redpoint team. They are really. yeah, I really like their group. They yeah, they care and they try to do the right thing, and it's yeah, I like
Yeah,
working
I'm
with them.
I'm assuming you got your Sequoia and your Anderson Horowitz and all those. I think they probably have a very different feel than at this stage how they interact with their portfolio
Yeah,
companies.
I mean we might also need
Actually, is Sequoia still around? I threw on that name and I don't even know.
yeah, I think they're still around. Yeah, we're working with them at Docker,
Oh,
and yeah, I have a lot of good friends there actually. I don't know if they're still there, but yeah, some good connections. Um, so I mean, we'll see later on what kind of people we need to work with, you know. But clearly for now, like we yeah we're good to partner with Redpoint, and it's going great.
and so also in growing the startup, as we said before, one of the toughest things is how do you scale with regards to people, right? And so you're
Yep.
about 50?
No, we are smaller than that. We're 25 today.
Okay,
Yeah, and yeah, because we didn't want to grow too fast, and we wanted to do the right thing, and so I keep hearing internally that we don't have enough engineers, and thankfully I went through that before at Docker, and I know that even when Dagger is 1,000 employees, we won't have enough engineers to do what we want. It will never stop. So
water always seeks its own level, or it's like what Jevons paradox, the idea of when you have automation to make things easier, that doesn't mean the workers rest. It means
that's
let's
right.
let's make more stuff.
That's exactly right. And I went through that at Docker when we scaled. We acquired company. We hired a lot of people quickly, and it was never enough. And so my point is, it's not because you don't have enough engineers that you need to hire faster. It's very important to time that wisely and link that to the team culture. Very important. And so that's why we're still 25 people today. We actually have a few open roles, so we are hiring people, but very slowly and on purpose. Um, and so yeah, it's very very important. We talk about the team culture a lot, and I can tell you when I have conversations with. We had a team offsite in San Diego a few weeks ago, actually, a month ago, and we spent a long time all together in a room in a hotel for a week, and this is when you can see the culture in action. Like
Right.
everyone is happy to be together. Like everyone is like each other, and it's really like a group of friends building something cool, and
And
that's
so
really
how
the thing.
distributed are you, right? Because that's
Yeah.
probably when you get
Oh yeah.
offsite, you get everyone together, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a locus down in the valley, but
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah, so we're trying to consolidate on American time zones just for the ease of communication.
Hmm.
But we have two people in the UK, one in the Azores Island, is doing great work on SDKs actually. Um, is one in India, Vikram, who's leading all the tech writing. It works awesome because it's very very autonomous. It's very when you build a remote team, the individuals matter more than when you're in an office where you can focus more on the group of people and the team.
Right.
But remote, you really have to make a special case for every single individual. But when we can, we try to consolidate on you know, Americas with an S. So
Hmm.
we have one person in Canada, two people in Argentina.
That's
Uh,
the great thing about South America. It takes you so long to get there, but it's only like an hour or two
that's right.
different.
That's right. Yeah. So that's why. And so yeah, and a few people in the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm located as well.
So you
Uh,
haven't implemented a return to office mandate.
well, we don't have an office, so if we want to do that one day, we'll have to find an office first.
That's right. Yes, to return to.
That's right. Yeah, no, but it works. I mean, it's definitely more challenging in a lot of ways. Starting with communication, obviously,
Hmm.
and when you see problems in the team, it always starts with communication. So it's very important to repeat the message. So I keep reminding people every time I'm telling someone you should write, a small status update or like or share the just
Hmm.
information with the rest of the team on that channel. And every time I get, oh, but people know already. I said, no, no, really, like you have to repeat the same thing over and over again. And if you have the feeling that you've been saying that for the fifth time, it's okay. Just still do it.
I mean, that's one thing is that when you're tired of it, the other people aren't because they really haven't heard. You've heard it a million times because
Yeah.
you've been saying it. That once again, communication is so important. So um, from now, as you if you look out over the next year or two, what are you looking to do? Oh, one more thing about
Yeah.
startups and building culture. Do you have a mission statement? Is there something that, or key principles that if you're a daggerette, or I don't know what you, what do you call it, daggers? I don't
Dagger notes actually. So Dagger notes are users of Dagger. We call them.
know.
Um, yeah, and so our mission is to build a DevOps operating system. I should have started with that actually. But yeah,
That makes that's a good. I like that soundbite.
yeah, yeah, it's really our mission. It makes sense actually when you think about it that um, uh, DevOps platform engineers they need a platform to build on top. It cannot be custom. It cannot be this workbench in your garage anymore.
Right.
And so that they need a platform on which they can assemble and maintain and keep evolving their software factories. So that's really what Dagger is doing. Um, yeah, and so
So, man, I interrupted once again, but so over the next 2 years, what would you like to see in scaling the company, areas that you want to do from technologically, partnerships you might want to do? What do you? And then the other thing I was going to ask is, you've got 25. I'm assuming most of them are engineers, because obviously when you're starting out, that's pretty much all engineers. Do you have a marketing department of one person, or do you
yeah,
have a salesperson who's the whole sales force? And
kind of, yeah, we have what we call solutions. We have a solutions engineer. We have even for non-engineers right now in the company, a lot of them are actually reading and writing code. It's just not on the core product, but yeah, it's really yeah, engineering heavy, in at this stage, as you can imagine. And we have also one person on marketing, one person, Miranda, actually, she's here working on heading the community. So the community is growing, and it's actually pretty large already, and so it's a full-time job to keep running this community and the events and everything, and making sure it keeps growing in the right way.
and just like you have people who are non-engineers doing engineering, people like yourself are also very articulate. I know in talking to Solomon before, he's very. You don't get the feeling that you're just a technical person who can't talk to others. So you're wearing a couple hats as well.
Oh, for sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially the job of being a founder is yeah, it's definitely wearing several hats. Um, I like to keep allocating time to code and work on the product and digging into the small details of what we're shipping every week. That's very important. But there are many things too. I'm involved in the partnerships that we are doing. I'm involved in the hiring, compensation, finance. Yeah, yeah, and
Professional services.
that's right. Like, yeah, I talk to customers every time I can. It's just yeah, and it's also, I mean, it's good. I we'll see. It's very important to stay agile as a founder when
Mhm.
especially in the early days, because you don't know what the company will need, in 5 years, for instance. And so it's important to don't put yourself in a box. Um,
And you're working agilely, and it's easier to work agilely because, as opposed to a big corporation
yeah,
where they have to keep evolving, but it's not as easier to turn that big ship where if you're a little motorboat, you can just turn when needed.
that's right.
And if you're building motorboats, you want to do it with a robot, and that's like what you do, right?
Here we go. We have a new analogy.
Yes.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, Sam Alba, thank you so much for the time. This has been great. And all right, all, we'll be talking to you next time.
Thank you,
All right, from KubeCon, this is Barton, and
Sam.
all right, bye bye.